President Cyril Ramaphosa has moved to quell public anger after reports suggested the upcoming national dialogue could cost a staggering R740 million. With citizens already frustrated by corruption, unemployment, and poor service delivery, Ramaphosa insists the actual cost will be much lower, promising transparency while facing a skeptical nation demanding answers. President Cyril Ramaphosa has once again found himself at the center of heated national debate, this time over the projected cost of South Africa's national dialogue. Critics have accused the government of throwing money into yet another event that looks good on paper but delivers little in terms of real outcomes. Early reports suggested the dialogue could cost as much as R740 million, an eye-watering figure that sparked outrage across political parties, civil society groups, and ordinary South Africans who feel they have heard this story before. With the economy under strain, unemployment sky high, and service delivery collapsing in many municipalities, spending hundreds of millions on a national conversation seemed like a tone-deaf decision. But Ramaphosa has now come out to say the cost will be much lower than the initial figures reported, hoping to calm fears that the dialogue would become yet another bloated state project. Ramaphosa insists the national dialogue is not meant to drain the public purse but rather to create a forum where South Africans from across the political, social, and economic spectrum can come together to forge consensus on the country's most pressing challenges. He argued that South Africa is at a crossroads, and that without an inclusive and structured conversation, divisions will only deepen, making governance harder and fueling instability. According to him, the R740 million figure is an inflated estimate, and government has taken deliberate steps to ensure costs are minimized through careful planning, shared resources, and contributions from various sectors including civil society and private partners. Still, the reassurance has not silenced skepticism. The very concept of a national dialogue has raised tough questions. For many citizens, the government already knows the issues: corruption, inequality, unemployment, load shedding, crime, poor education outcomes, and lack of healthcare resources. Why then spend hundreds of millions to host an event that merely restates what every South African experiences daily? Opposition parties like the DA and Action SA have been quick to brand the dialogue as a waste of money, pointing out that the country has already hosted countless commissions, inquiries, and conferences that ended up producing lengthy reports but no change on the ground. Even the ruling ANC's alliance partners have voiced concern, with some union leaders asking if such funds could not instead be redirected toward job creation initiatives or fixing basic infrastructure. But Ramaphosa's argument is not without precedent. South Africa has a long history of dialogues shaping its trajectory. The Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, talks in the early 1990s paved the way for democracy, while the Truth and Reconciliation Commission opened difficult conversations about healing from apartheid. Ramaphosa's framing of the current national dialogue is in that tradition, an attempt to pause and reset in a time of political and economic crisis. He argues that the problems South Africa faces are so interconnected and entrenched that without a collaborative national effort, they will remain unsolved for generations. This, he says, makes dialogue not an optional extra but a necessity. Still, the trust deficit is enormous. South Africans are tired of promises, tired of task teams, and tired of processes that consume money while citizens continue to struggle. Load shedding continues to hammer the economy, crime levels remain among the highest in the world, and poverty is deepening. Against this backdrop, hearing that nearly R740 billion might be earmarked for talking sessions was always bound to trigger anger. Ramaphosa's clarification that the figure will be much lower was necessary, but the question is whether people believe him. Trust in government finances is at a low point, given repeated scandals around inflated tenders, mismanagement of funds, and outright looting. Even if the dialogue ends up costing a fraction of the initial estimate, public confidence in how that money is managed remains severely shaken. There's also the political undertone. With the ANC weakened after the last election, coalition politics is now the new normal. A national dialogue provides the ANC with a platform to reposition itself as the leader of consensus building, painting Ramaphosa as a statesman rather than a weakened party boss scrambling for relevance. Opposition parties see through this and accuse the president of using the dialogue as a political survival tool rather than a genuine instrument of national renewal. Some even claim that the dialogue will be stacked with pro-ANC voices and establishment figures, turning it into little more than a glorified public relations exercise. Ordinary South Africans watching from the sidelines might not care much for the political maneuvering, but they do care about value for money. When schools lack textbooks, hospitals lack equipment, and families cannot afford food, the optics of a multi-million rand dialogue are grim. To convince the public, Ramaphosa will need more than vague promises of lower costs. He will need transparent budgeting, clear outcomes, and a firm commitment that the dialogue will not end up as just another report gathering dust. Already, watchdog organizations are demanding that every cent spent be accounted for, and some have called for parliamentary oversight to ensure the dialogue remains financially responsible. The idea itself, bringing different groups together to discuss South Africa's future, resonates with many. South Africans are people who thrive on debate, discussion, and collective problem-solving. The frustration is not with talking, but with endless talking that never translates into action. If Ramaphosa can prove that this dialogue is different, that it produces concrete steps to fix Eskom, reform education, create jobs, and rebuild trust in government, then it could turn out to be money well spent, even at a fraction of R740 million. But if it becomes another talk shop filled with grand speeches and empty resolutions, then not only will the money have been wasted, but the hope of national renewal will have suffered another blow. In the end, Ramaphosa's promise that the cost will be much lower than R740 million is more than a financial assurance, it is a political gamble. He is betting that the public will give him the benefit of the doubt, that South Africans still believe in the power of dialogue, and that the process can yield more than just words. But the burden of proof lies squarely with him and his government. Citizens are watching closely, and their patience is thin. What Ramaphosa delivers, or fails to deliver, through this national dialogue could well define his legacy in the eyes of many. South Africa's story has always been one of negotiation, compromise, and dialogue. It was dialogue that ended apartheid. It was dialogue that allowed democracy to take root. But times have changed, and the people are weary. This new dialogue will need to show not only that it listens, but that it acts. Without that, the promise of lower costs will mean nothing, and the cynicism of the people will harden further.